Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Steve Creasy, and I'd like to welcome back to the show our co-host from Pack Your Pixie Dust. How you doing today, Christy?
I am well. How are you, Steve?
Not too bad. Hey, why don't we change our sights on something completely different, something that we've never talked about before?
I am super excited about that.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, and I won't give it away, but we are going to talk about Viking Cruise Line. So immediately I think of like Norway and like Scandinavia, don't you?
I sure do. And now that I'm picturing it, I've got the little outfits in my head.
Well, I'm super excited to welcome to the show today Shay from Pensacola. How you doing today, Shay?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for reaching out to us. And one of the series that we try to do, we love Disney Cruise Line here. Obviously, it's a Disney Cruise Line podcast. But we try and take a look at some of the other different cruise lines because it doesn't always work out for people to sail with Disney. And you just recently went on a Viking cruise and reached out and wanted to talk about it. And I really appreciate that.
Well, thanks. I sure did. We went on a Viking cruise line from Sydney to Auckland in late February to early March. It was a 14-day cruise.
So just
before. Yeah.
Yeah, you and I are going to the same place, Christy.
Just before people could stop traveling forever.
We threaded the needle. Just dumb luck.
Yeah, well, let's not say forever. We're going to be traveling again. But before we jump into your sailing, and that's why I was kind of talking about, being Norway, and we're actually going to go all the way down to Australia. So I'm super curious to see, and I pulled up the Viking website to see where they sail, and they pretty much sail all over the world, don't they?
They really do. They have such an extensive range for such a young cruise company. They're not that old as far as their ocean-going cruises. So it's amazing how and where they go. It's almost everywhere.
Yeah, they have 7 ships already compared to Disney's 4. We looked them up, and they're roughly about half the size of the Magic and Wonder. There's probably some differences. I didn't look at each one of the different ships, but to give everybody a little bit of a background. But before we jump into your cruise itself, let's talk about your cruising and Disney background, Shay.
Okay, well, I first fell in love with Disney, as most of us do, when we were young. I first went in 1980, and I will not say how old I was, but old enough to remember it. And then as I got older, would bounce around Disney as a young adult. Then I had a child, and Disney became one of our main vacation venues. I was engaged to my husband, who lived in Southern California, so did a lot of Disneyland as well. A lot of Run Disneys out there because they have no humidity. And then as my daughter got old and tweeny, we started branching out, doing more Disney Cruise Line, and eventually adding in some Adventures by Disney. So we've done a lot of the product. I know I've been on 16 DCLs, 2 to Alaska, 2 to the Med, and then a lot of shorty, 3-4 days out of Port Canaveral, just because it's easy.
So then how did you end up coming to Viking and picking this cruise line?
Well, like they say with Disney, it all started with a mouse. This all started with a flight. I had requested alerts from, I guess he's a travel blogger, hacker, and he sent an email one fine May day last year and said there are 2 seats in Qantas First from LAX to Sydney or LAX to Melbourne. And that had been one of my odd windmills that I had been saving and hoarding points for. And so I booked it. And then I asked my husband if it was okay if we went. And then I asked my husband if it was okay if we went on a cruise, because I was like, well, what are we going to do once we get there? And he's a very nice man and said yes, yes, and yes. And so that's how we decided. We had been looking at Viking for quite a while. We have friends who are big Viking river cruisers, and they've been to several in Europe. So it was on my radar. And then the fact that it went to both Australia and New Zealand, to me, seemed like it was made sort of that long trip worth it. So that's how that all happened.
What was it about Viking that your friends talked about with the river cruising that intrigued you about Viking?
They just loved the service. They loved their experience. They're kind of like us. It's funny. They're actually my parents' age. So, I kind of know their activity level, but they're pretty active for people who are my parents' age, but they're not super big foodies. And my husband and I are not either. It's like food is fuel kind of philosophy. So I just knew that they had sort of similar activity levels, similar interests. He actually, ironically, in the military, he was actually under me, even though he's 20 years older than I am. So I kind of know some of his quirks and his preferences. We've known each other for almost 30 years, amazingly. It's sort of one of those, if he endorses a product, I'm going to go with it.
No, there's definitely people like that, probably in both of our lives, Steve, right? That we know that we can trust what they have to say and they know what we like.
Oh, definitely. So, Christy, you've worked with Viking before. What are some of the differences between Viking and Disney? And I'll be super excited to hear your experiences as well as we go through it, Shay.
Oh, yeah. I definitely want to hear Shay's experiences. So Viking includes more than other cruise lines. It's a more inclusive. It's not totally inclusive, but it really includes quite a bit. They include a shore excursion at every port of call. There's included Wi-Fi. They have specialty dining, and they have room service, but that's the same as Disney. But they also include beer and wine at lunch and dinner on board. Specialty coffees and bottled water are included. Self-serve laundry is included, so you don't have to pay extra. And the port taxes and fees are just included in the price, as well as ground transfers if you purchase air with Viking. So that is some of the things that are just different than the other cruise lines. The other items in the stateroom that it includes is just like a bathrobe and slippers, which in suites, other cruise lines have those, but in the standard cabins, they do not. And so I think those would be the main differences.
Did she hit them all, Shay?
All but one, I think.
What did I miss?
There's a little tiny mini fridge. Well, I guess little and tiny is redundant, but there's a mini fridge in your suite, and they stock it with sodas and little snacks, and that's refreshed once a day. So I am a Diet Coke person. I don't drink coffee. I don't usually drink tea. I don't drink wine. I don't drink beer. I drink Diet Coke. And so I would make sure that I drank those two before our stateroom host came. So then I'd have at least, two more later. And again, they're little mini Toblerones, 3 of those, and a couple different nut, raisin nut package things. So, if you absolutely had to have a midday snack because you couldn't wait 2 hours to eat, you had a snack. And it was just really nice. It was a little nice touch.
And there's no additional charge for that, which is nice too. And then Viking is 18 and up, right?
Correct.
So that's obviously a major difference from Disney Cruise Line.
Huge difference. Probably, when you look at it as a Disney fan, that's the main difference. But, like Disney, no gambling, and like Disney, very limited smoking areas. I'm not even sure where the one smoking area was. So those are similarities, but important ones for me.
And then, what made me think, I just thought of the Virgin Cruise Line. Virgin is trying to launch their cruise line, which they'll sail, as of now, it's pushed back to this fall. But Virgin has, we were talking about this on one of our podcasts, the smallest pool that ever exists for adults. How is the pool on the Viking cruise ship?
Well, there are 2 pools. I'm not sure one could really do effective laps in either one. One is pretty small. It's their infinity pool, and it's off the back, and you swim, and there's plexiglass, and you're like, okay, yeah, there's a seat. I did it once. It was a little freaky because I have height issues.
Oh my God, that would be so cool.
It was once. It's kind of more of a, a wading pool. So, bigger than a wading pool, but definitely smaller than the pool in my backyard, I guess is how I'll put that. Then they have one that is actually can have an enclosure in case it rains or for poor weather. And that one's a little bit larger. It's maybe a size of a backyard pool. And really, except for maybe one day on the cruise, it was never person soup or anything like that. Like it can be on other lines.
So kind of more like a soaking pool, like on Disney, the adult pool, as far as kind of a place to hang out in mostly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The infinity pool has 2 hot tubs next to it. So, and a bar right next to it. So, that's where people would go into, sit in a jacuzzi and hang out and drink on a lovely day.
Kind of relax. With Viking including so much into it, as you started to look at the cruise that you guys booked out of Sydney, what were the things that you had to choose beforehand besides just the cruise destination itself? Or did you have anything to choose?
The main question is always how much do you want to spend? And that translates into your cabin. We didn't get the least expensive, but we got the second least expensive cabin. All cabins on Viking cruise ships have verandas. So that's nice. So we got the deluxe veranda. And then like on Disney, the prices vary even within the category depending on location. And location wasn't a big deal. So I think ours was, they have deluxe veranda 1 through 6, and we were deluxe veranda 5, and it was absolutely fine. It had a veranda, it had Diet Coke, it was a nice room. So that was one thing. One sticker shock, maybe I would say, is unlike Disney Cruise Line, Viking normally, unless they're running a special, expects you to pay within, I think it's 30 days or the end of the month of when you book. So it's one of those where if you're going to go, you might want to save up all your money and then be prepared to pay it all up front. That's one of the reasons I called my husband and said, can we do this? Because, again, that's very different from Disney Cruise Line.
Yeah, in the industry, they actually got some pushback from that. And I'm trying to think if they have changed that policy. And honestly, I am not sure, but I know that overall there were some issues with that. So a lot of pushback.
We'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but let's say that there are some, they kind of constantly run specials, maybe 2 for 1 or, half off of the deposit. And one of them I've noticed recently, and actually when we did later book maybe 3 other cruises, were that it was a delayed payment. So for our next cruises with them, it's 6 months out, which is, again, much better and similar, although not as lenient as Disney's, but still good.
Yeah, for sure. How was the booking process? Like booking besides then, okay, you have to pay this pretty instantly.
Besides the, hi, come up with this money. It was super easy because once my husband had given the okay, I text my friends. They, I guess, always just work directly with someone at Viking. They're, call us, that number. So they actually called the one lady that they work with all the time, and they said, hi, we're booked in this cabin. She's expecting your phone call. Call her, and she'll put you right next door to us. And so I just called and gave a credit card, and it was pretty seamless. And I think we got a tiny, tiny, tiny amount because they referred a friend. So I think we got a total of $200 off or something. It was a token, but,
hey,
still nice.
Whatever.
Right. So we'll take it. So yeah, it was easy. It was pick up the phone and call. And again, because they had sort of seasoned her, so she was expecting my phone call.
So what was it like pre-cruise? Did you get things from them? There is the complimentary shore excursion. Do you book those in advance? What was that like?
It's similar but different than Disney. First of all, since it was Australia and New Zealand, we had to get visas. So I sound terribly lazy, but I let my friends go through and figure out the visa process first because there was a requirement that you have to have 2 copies of your passport, but it was on certain paper. So my friend went to 3 different places before she found one that made the kind of copy that was required. And so once she found it, then I just went because that's how I work. So that was the big deal because I've never been anywhere where we had to send off for visas that at least I can remember. So that was a little bit different. Then sort of like Disney Cruise Line with your Castaway Club level, you are able to book the specialty dining and the excursions at a certain date. And again, since we were kind of the second to the lowest from the tier, we didn't do any of that until December, which was fine. Because unlike Disney, and this is not anything I had ever read or knew about, if you don't do their included excursion, and I really only did one, I think, all the others we did paid excursions, you pay up front. So again, another have your pennies collected sort of example.
And that is almost every cruise line. In fact,
Okay.
I don't know besides Disney a cruise line that you pick your shore excursions that you don't book those in advance, which, on the one hand, the Disney way is nice, but then on the other hand, you get a big fat bill at the end of your cruise. So then on the other cruise lines, if you've prepaid for some of your stuff, you're not getting a big fat bill unless you're booking something on the cruise. So it's just, it's just a different way to look at it, I guess.
Right. I actually got a check because I canceled one of my excursions and didn't do anything else. And so I said, well, can I just give, I have this onboard credit. Can I just add it to the gratuities? I had prepaid the gratuities. And they said, no, we'll send you a check. So not only did I not get a big bill, I got a check in the mail from Viking.
Nice.
That's my kind of vacation when you get home and they send you a check for taking a vacation with them.
Exactly. Like, thank you. It was awesome.
So let's kind of just stick with the excursions. We'll kind of go through the ports you stopped at here in just a sec. But were you happy with the excursions? Obviously, you said you kind of did your own paid ones, but overall, were the excursions that were included something that piqued your interest at all, or why did you pick the ones you guys did?
Well, for me, the whole point, and everyone has a different focus when they go somewhere. And for me, I wanted to see animals. I did not want to be in Australia and not see a koala. So most of Viking's excursions are sort of overviews, bus tours or
like city tours or whatever, right?
Tours, right.
Mm-hmm.
And, I did not want to leave Australia without seeing a platypus. So that's why I booked the ones I did mostly, was so I could see, animals, wildlife. My husband is a little more sporty, I guess, and so he did 2 bike rides and a hike. One day I did a helicopter tour over Wellington. That was pretty cool. I'd never been on a helicopter.
Wow.
Right. So, I was like, well, I've never done this, and here I'm a place where I've never been. The one paid tour that we did, or unpaid, sorry, the one gratuitous tour that we did, we really enjoyed it. It was in New Zealand, and we drove out to the countryside, and we learned a lot about kiwi. And we met these lovely, lovely church ladies in the little town hall, and we got to buy kiwi stuff and eat kiwi and meet a former captain of the All Blacks, which is New Zealand's sort of all-star rugby team. And he taught us more about kiwi. And it was very informative and yet beautiful. And we had snacks. So it was kind of perfect.
Well, let's kind of go back to just the cruise itself. So we didn't really even talk about this, but it was just you and your husband who went, or was your daughter with you?
No, my daughter is in college in Massachusetts, and so she was there. And then she was actually her spring break was when we were gone, so she actually flew back home for spring break and spent time with my parents, who were house and dog sitting. So she was definitely not with us, and is still a little bit salty about it.
I can understand that.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the cabin quick, and before we talk about the rest of the cruise, as far as the size goes, did you feel pretty comfortable? I know we've been on Norwegian before, and it's nice for my wife and I, but boy, it's a lot smaller than Disney. How was the cabin size? And then just you talked about based on the cabin price could be based on location. The ships are a little bit smaller. Did you feel like that would even really be a big deal?
It was not a big deal as far as the size of the ship, because everything was so, compact, I guess is the best word. Uh-huh. The rooms were a little bit smaller, but Viking has a max of 2 people per stateroom or cabin, which is another big difference between Disney and Viking. Viking is 2 people, that's it. So while it was more compact, everything was done very nicely. I think the only thing I really missed was, and this is probably on me, frankly, were more drawer spaces. Disney has a lot of places where you can stash your clothes. And Viking, because there's free laundry, doesn't expect you to pack every single thing in your closet, as I tend to do. So,
yeah, but you have to do it yourself.
You do. Well, at the level we were, yes. At other levels, you do not. But again, I could have gotten away with probably only 20% of what I had taken. But you don't know that. So you learn. And obviously, flex. I thought also I would miss the split bathroom. And I really didn't. The bathroom was very nice. I had read several reports about the heated floors, which I didn't realize you actually have to turn a dial to activate the heated floors. But once I did that, the heated floors were really nice. It felt like a cruise ship cabin, but not in any way, shape, or form confining. And, it was very nice that there's a balcony. And honestly, we were out and about doing things so much that it really wasn't noticeable that it was probably 100 square feet. Well, maybe that sounds like a lot. It was smaller than Disney's for sure.
So you guys cruised in February and March. That's kind of their summer months down there. How was the weather? I know going down towards Tasmania, you're getting a little further south, and then New Zealand as well. For people kind of thinking about traveling to Australia at that time, how was the weather for you on this cruise?
I would like to say in my defense, that's why I had overpacked, because I was thinking summer in Australia, maybe more fall-like in New Zealand, because I'm coming from Florida, and 60 and 70, we're wearing our Uggs. I was looking at it as a Floridian going someplace that had temperatures that would be low. And again, Sydney is so south that it wasn't super hot. I thought it would be, and it really wasn't. It was very pleasant, but I'm not sure I ever wore shorts in their summer. So, light slacks, capris. Now, our friends with whom we traveled, actually did the pre-cruise land tour, and Viking offers those on several cruises. And so they went up to Cairn and the Great Barrier Reef, and she said the rainforest more north was hot and humid. So I think we just stayed so south in Australia that it really was never super hot, except maybe one day we were outside of Melbourne, and we were at an animal sanctuary. And so there wasn't a lot of shade, and the sun was shining, and it was probably maybe 80 something degrees. But every other day was just pretty beautiful from my perspective, which is, 70s and 60s are rare birds around here.
So you said earlier that food is fuel for you, which I just don't understand at all, but good for you. Good for you. How was the food on the cruise?
The food, and this is where I'm a terrible reporter. I'm like, well, the food was fine.
No, that's good. I mean, I guess, how would you compare the food to Disney Cruise Line?
I think it was very similar. And I'm sure some people will think that's horrible if they're Viking fans, and if people are Disney fans, they'll think that's horrible. But I'm like, I'm the person that on Disney either orders from the kids' plate or the lighter side and just has the unsauced stuff. And,
Okay.
So the only thing that I really got excited about, frankly, was that they had gelato every day and in their buffet. And it was like 8 flavors. So they had, like 4 or 5 that were sort of every day, and then 3 or 4 that would rotate. So the excitement was, what's the new gelato flavor today? So I do, like a 5-year-old, I do get excited about ice cream.
It is not ice cream. It is gelato, and that is different.
So
that is grown up.
That's grown-up ice cream. They would have theme days out on the, for lunch, usually out on the deck near the infinity pool, which is really right next to the buffet. So one day was Greek Day, and that was so good. And one day was Southern Barbecue, which, as a girl who spent a lot of time in Texas, I did not avail myself of Viking's interpretation of Southern Barbecue. As well as gelato every day in the buffet. They had sushi every night, and then they had pizza every day and every night. It would be really hard to not find something to be able to eat and enjoy. I know one lady was complaining loudly, because I heard her, about not having fresh, like whole fruit, like apples or oranges or bananas. And I think the explanation that I couldn't hear as well was about Australia and New Zealand have really strong bio laws. So they didn't want to run the risk of someone being arrested or fined for carrying an apple off the ship. So they just make it available, So they're trying to prevent you from hurting yourself, I guess. They have a buffet, as I mentioned, and it serves breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's also a sit-down restaurant called, I love this, The Restaurant, and it serves a sit-down table service, breakfast, and dinner, and then lunch on sea days. They have 2 specialty restaurants, the Chef's Table and Manfredi's. And then they have a little tiny food. It has like 3 or 4 offerings for breakfast and lunch called Mama Sans, which I guess is an homage to the founder's mother, I believe, because it has some really Norwegian sort of food. And then my favorite place was called the Aquavit Cafe, which is basically it's a lot like Disney. It reminded me of Disney, it's like the daisies and the Plutos and near the pool. And it was
the quick service.
The quick service, fried food, delightful stuff. So let's just say on the last day, the chef there said to me, "This is going to be the last time you get this." And I said, and I'm very sad about it.
I feel like you and Amber need to meet.
Yes.
She's in Florida.
We had reservations for the chef's table because, again, in the level that we could have one reservation for each of the specialty restaurants, Manfredi's, which is Italian, and the chef's table. And I looked at the chef's table because they have a rotating menu. And I looked online and I had found that our second night was Australia. And I was like, I want some Wagyu. It's a straight menu and that's it. Well, they switched. So we went on the second night. We were all excited and they handed us a Mexican menu.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, you can take the girl out of Texas, but unfortunately I'm allergic to cilantro. So when we told them that, they're like, oh, well, you'll have to wait 45 minutes because we'll have to make everything by hand. And we're like, okay, goodbye. So we left. So I did not get to try that, and I apologize.
Oh.
So, live and learn. Maybe next time we'll go and try a different night. They have different themes, like Pan-Pacific and Australia and Mexico and all sorts of themes. But unfortunately, sometimes if you have allergies, and I think you understand this, if you have allergies or restrictions, it kind of restricts how creative you can be with your food.
Absolutely.
So Manfredi's was, it's kind of the same but different from Paulo. The best advice we got was to order half portions of everything. So then we weren't completely overstuffed when we left. We still were because the bread was so good. And again, I just remember some lovely ravioli, nice steak, and again, this fresh bread that I feel like sometimes on the rest of the cruise ship, it's not quite as fresh. It was really good, and it was just amazing. So I'm looking forward to going there again. I've already told Jerry, okay, I know what I'm getting when we go again.
So was that something, the specialty restaurants, was that something you could add on once you're on board, or were they kind of booked up before the sailing started?
You could, actually. Okay. The buffet is known as World Restaurant, and for the first probably 2 or 3 nights, there would be someone from the specialty restaurants, and they had the menus up. And so if you hadn't, booked on opening day, like some people tend to do because they're trained by Disney, then you could say, oh, do you have any openings on this day? And so they did take extra reservations or initial reservations.
Did you try to rebook because since you couldn't really eat the meal the night that you were there at the chef's table?
Can I just say the service was so wonderful. The head waiter came over and he was distraught and he was so unhappy because I was like, gotta go. And he was like, well, do you want it? And I was like, well, no. I had booked it originally just because it was Australia night, because none of the other themes for the rest of the cruise really were appealing. I really don't like a lot of just fill in the blank. I'm just really picky, unfortunately. So I very well could have, and we could have had whatever we wanted. And I was just like, no, I'm sorry. I mean, I guess that's a good thing. I had done my homework, so I knew that it wasn't, it just wasn't going to work for us. But for the rest of the cruise, and this was night 2, so for 12 more nights, that head waiter was very, very attentive. Whenever he saw me, because they, how they are, they work everywhere, and whenever you're eating, he'll pop up and, hi, can you do you want an extra dessert? Whatever I wanted, I think I got. I guess I was really grateful that I was allergic to cilantro. I could have, that was the really long answer to yes, I could have.
Well, I like the fact that it's flexible like that, as far as being able to, if you want to change it up a little bit as you're going along on the cruise, that's an option. Besides food, let's talk about what were some of the entertainment options, or what kind of entertainment did they have on board the ship while you were on board? Can I say on board 5 times?
Apparently.
I guess.
Well, Viking is geared towards a more elderly clientele. So, there was no shuffleboard. There was no belly flop contest.
Wouldn't you think shuffleboard, wasn't that like from the original cruising days? I would think actually shuffleboard is an elderly game.
Maybe it was.
To say.
I misspoke. I apologize. There was shuffleboard up on the very top deck, but there weren't like competitions, I guess is probably the best way to say it. And there was actually a little putting range, but unfortunately it had some issue, so no one could do the putting range. So that looked kind of fun, like play a little mini golf. So I misspoke. There was shuffleboard. There was a little putting green. There was a lot of acts in the evening where it would be like the best of, and they would have performers that were on board singing. Actually, our cruise director is an opera singer, I found out, and so he sometimes would do a performance. There was sort of a late night, and I never saw it because, again, we're early to bed, early rise, but there was a late night kind of dance, like with a theme. So one night it would be 70s night, one night it would be 60s night, and I slept through all that. There were lectures from historians and naturalists and experts on the area. And for me, again, that's kind of what I was into. So, I would listen to the history of the Maori or, things in Australia that will kill you. I think the lecture was the good, the bad, and the ugly for animals. And so the very nice thing was all the lectures were recorded, and much like on Disney, you could just watch it on demand in your room. So
oh, nice.
It was very nice. So if there was a conflict, it was the Orion, and the lady who christened the Orion is a NASA physician and an astronaut. And tying into that, they had an astronomer on board who would give lectures about the southern sky. And they actually had a 3D movie theater on the top floor where you could watch 3D movies. I think you had to make a reservation for that. Unfortunately, they only had 2 trivia games, and so we made the second one. And I had heard it was pretty competitive, but I didn't realize how competitive it was. It was hard. So we did not win.
What kind of topics did they have?
It's funny. They only had 15 questions, and I remember 2 were Beatles questions and 2 were Olympics questions. And maybe there was an Elvis question. So it was all over the place. So it wasn't themed. Disney will have like sports trivia, it'll have general trivia, it'll have music trivia. And this was all over the map. And I was proud. We got 6 out of 15, and we were probably in the top 40%. The people who won, I think, got maybe 9 out of 15 correct. So... But anyway, that was fun. There's a spa and a gym, and if you ever need anyone to do spa reviews, I'm probably your person. So that's where you probably saw me more than you would see other people. So that was kind of my entertainment if I'm not, off exploring.
And how would it compare to Disney?
The spa was amazing. It was fabulous. If anyone is familiar with the Rainforest Room, basically they have a similar setup, except they have actually a pool it's like a bubbly pool. I don't know. And then a hot tub, and then they have heated loungers, and then they have a snow room. That was one of the things I wanted to do, was go to the snow room. And then they have a steam room, and all of that is free. Unlike the Rainforest Room, where you have to pay either a daily rate or get the length of cruise pass, all of this was gratis. It was very nice. And again, I really enjoyed it because it was very relaxing, especially on the days when the seas were kind of rough. And then I actually did have a spa treatment. And unlike Disney Cruise Line, which is run by Steiner, and so they kind of have to push product, and there's always a hard sell at the end. Absolutely no, there was none of that. And it was the best massage I have had probably ever.
Wow.
It was funny, though, because her name was Natalia, and she was from Russia, and I just kept flashing back to Rocky and Bullwinkle. We have ways to make you talk. So anyway, so I was kind of chuckling the whole time, imagining Natasha from Rocky and Bullwinkle. But anyway, that was just me being weird. It was wonderful. It was, like I said, the best massage ever, and It was just very relaxing and did everything a spa is supposed to do.
That sounds great. I actually, that type of experience, I might be willing to do a spa treatment. But the hard selling and all the other pushing, it really kind of talks me out of it on Disney Cruise Line. And I know a lot of people, that's like their thing. And instead, I will pick a nicer cabin and then just stay there. So that's how I find my relaxation. But that spa sounds like something I might be interested in experiencing.
It's amazing. And again, I have really outgrown the whole product pushing, hard sell after, you're supposed to be relaxing and then they like start making you, or want you to buy hundreds of dollars worth of products. So this was quite a relief. And it's why on Disney, if I do anything in the spa, it's just the rainforest room because there's no interaction with the staff other than here's your band. So
right.
Which is kind of sad, but that's all right. So it was wonderful. And the snow room, again, I don't think it's as interesting to you, Christy, as it was to me because snow isn't,
No. Yeah. Don't want to be cold.
Right. So you just go and you sit. Well, the whole Scandinavian hot, cold is sort of throughout. So, there's like a circuit that you could do if you chose, but you don't have to. So you'd sit in the snow room and then which is just a room where they've made snow and it's cold. And then you go to the hot tub and then there's an ice water shower where basically it's a bucket and you pull this rope and then it dumps cold water on you, and then you go in this
sounds like a torture chamber.
No, it's so much fun. To me, I guess.
Does this interest you at all?
Oh, well, when you do the rainforest room, and my vast experience of doing it once, they do have those showers where it's cold, where you go from the cold to hot, and so yeah, I love that actually.
But like ice bucket cold?
Yeah, it's kind of stimulating when you kind of go back and forth like that, to be completely honest.
Okay.
Well, if you don't like that, they have heated loungers, which are they're not quite as heated as the rainforest room. I have to say that. They're probably, a few degrees less, but then you can just lay in the heated loungers and read, which is what I spend a lot of time doing. And again, it's all included in the price of your cruise. So you can go for 5 minutes or you can go for 2 hours and you're not feeling like, oh, I've wasted money because I haven't spent any extra.
How was availability? Get the lounger or whatever.
For the most part, it was pretty good. I had a couple days where I kind of made sea days out of port days, and those days were obviously much less. And then whenever we were crossing from Tasmania to New Zealand, that was pretty rough. So a lot of people weren't out and about either. So I didn't ever have to fight for a lounger or space or anything like that. I mean, I got to the point where if one person walked in, I was like, what are you doing in here? So it was pretty available.
Oh, that's good. How many port days did you have?
All right. We had, counting the day we arrived, so we had 2 days in Sydney, a day in Melbourne, a day in Tasmania. So 4 total in Australia. Then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in New Zealand. So it was for 14 days, it was fairly port intensive.
So I kind of I love those cruises that do that, where you leave from a pretty major city like that. Was the ship parked right down Sydney, so it was easy to get into the city itself?
Sadly, no.
Okay.
We stayed at the Park Hyatt Sydney, which if you have the chance, I highly recommend. Because it's just so central and so beautiful, and you see the Opera House, and there's a cruise berth right there. So I was like, oh, please let it be us, because I was watching. No, I think it was a Norwegian ship that was there. There are 3. I learned a lot about cruise ports in Sydney. There are 3, and there's one right downtown. I mean, in the middle of it all. And then there are 2 that are farther away in more industrial areas. And unfortunately, that's where the Viking ship was docked. And interestingly, one of the only 2 times that there was no Wi-Fi available. And I'm not sure why. They said the ship staff said, oh, we always have a hard time. And it was so funny to hear everyone complaining. It's like, come on, y'all. We lived without Wi-Fi for how many years?
Isn't that crazy?
I think it's like a day,
Did they run a shuttle into Sydney then for you since you boarded the ship and then you had that extra day there? Did they run or was it just up to you to get into this town itself?
Not to my knowledge. I think it was really up to you. Okay. And again, most people did port excursions. Even we took a port excursion out to Bondi Beach and to the Sydney Opera House, a nice tour of that. So yeah, most people just got out and about And then, of course, they had their included one, which was a city tour. So most of the clientele, and we haven't really touched on this, but most of the clientele were much older, very well traveled, and something like, getting a cab to the city was just not something that fazed them at all.
Before we jump into some of these ports, as far as that went then, did you guys sit by yourself at dinner? Well, you were with friends. Okay, never mind. So you probably just hung out with them most of the time, right?
We figured out that, our patterns were all different.
Right.
They're, again, they're in their 70s. So, for instance, they don't normally eat lunch. And my husband and I are like, we eat lunch, must eat. So it just kind of came down to, we agreed that we would meet for dinner every night.
Okay.
And then that way you met other people eating, breakfast. You'd chat with everyone. Everyone was super friendly. And there were tables for 4, there were tables for 6, but most of the tables and the dining setups were for 2. So
okay.
If you're just a couple, you didn't feel weird because, you just talk to the people right next to you, which is what we did.
I've just found, and I'm sure you have, Christy, is just when you meet other travelers like that, people just like to tell you about their adventures. They love talking and reaching out to other travelers and hearing about where you've been. So it just seems like a really good group of people. Kind of like I get that feeling from ABD where, you've got groups of people that travel all over the world and are pretty used to it, I think. So I love the idea of being able to bounce ideas off and hearing about other people's experiences.
It was wonderful. Just the vast majority of people. We had lunch one day and we spoke to a lady from England, and she told us about being invited to one of the Queen's garden parties. Like, oh, yeah. She's like, I wasn't next to her, but I was within arm's reach. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's super cool,
So this cruise, you guys start off at Sydney, head down to Melbourne, Tasmania. We don't have time to talk about every single port that you guys went to and what you did there, but what were some of the highlights and what were some of the memorable moments that you had in the ports that you stopped at?
Again, I'm really into animals. I wanted to go to vet school. I did not, but so having read about the platypus or the koala or the kangaroo, seeing them pretty up close and personal. I did not realize the platypus was nocturnal. And so we were essentially at a zoo outside of Melbourne, and they had dug down into sort of a tunnel down and then created an aquarium. So poor platypi, they were tricked into thinking that day was night. But so we saw these little tiny guys that looked kind of like otters, but kind of like ducks swimming around in water. And that was amazing. I'd always been fascinated by them. So that was neat. In Tasmania, we saw Tasmanian devils, and they actually, where we went, had just hundreds of kangaroos hopping around. And you walk around a path and they had, okay, you can feed them, and this is where you scratch them on their chest. And so, we have a picture of me scratching a kangaroo, and, so those were highlights for me as far as just sort of the fauna of the region. Then when we were in New Zealand, I went on a boat trip and we just went around like the harbor, and we saw dolphins and seals and a sea lion who was actually stalking the seals and birds. And, so that was all exciting. And then, so again, for me, the theme is animals. For my husband, he was riding bikes and drinking different wines. And then we both actually really enjoyed our kiwi tour, the one included one that we went on, when we learned about different kinds of kiwi, and we tried kiwi, and, we drank tea and ate cookies and had kiwi. So that was just kind of fun. And all my friends got kiwi related merchandise, as you can imagine. He also went out to the Sky Tower, which is, sort of on the Auckland, skyline. That's the really tall one. So he enjoyed that. And he actually went to our friends, I'll just throw in our friends, did a lot of Lord of the Rings. You could go to the Hobbitron, you could go to where some of the sets were. It was pretty, you could drink wine the whole time, or you could see animals, or you could, get your Lord of the Rings on. So the offerings were so diverse that you really could just do kind of whatever interested you.
So you and your husband actually did a lot of different tours.
Oh, yeah. When we signed up, I was like, oh my goodness, he's doing 3 of them with me? What?
Too many?
I'm used to a lot of alone time. Sydney, Melbourne and Tasmania, we were together. And then in New Zealand, we did completely different things. Because again, he's off riding bikes and hiking up a hill or a mountain, so he's doing some more active things. And of course, I had to work in my do nothing days because, it's a vacation.
Yeah, I need those days too.
So it was fun with our friends because the days in New Zealand, for the most part, we were all doing 3 different things because they stuck together. And so, we would compare notes and show pictures and, just talk about our days. And so there really wasn't any lack of conversation topics anyway, but there definitely wasn't if you've got all these different experiences.
Well, it's a pretty amazing trip as far as, getting Sydney and Melbourne, the 2 big cities, Tasmania, which is just some friends of ours. We've got family that live in Melbourne. My dad's got a cousin, and they've been down to Tasmania, so they've seen pictures. Not a lot of people down there. But then you head over to New Zealand, where you get the South Island with all the outside activities, Christchurch with the wine country, Wellington with the hobbits, and on up to Auckland. What an amazing cruise.
It really was. I mean, it ticked all the boxes. The only thing that disappointed me was I was kind of hoping it would be a one and done. Okay, but now I'm going to go back. And so I'm really frustrated.
I hate when that happens, or love when that happens, or hate when that happens, or both.
So no, I want to check it off.
Oh, did you get to hold the baby koala?
We did not. Well, different. Are they states or territories, Steve?
I believe they're territories.
Different territories have different laws, and so you have to go kind of more north for that to be allowed. So the territory where we were does not encourage tourists to hold the koalas. So I was absolutely fine with that, actually, because I'm like, okay. I was able to get really, really close to one in Tasmania. Again, you couldn't hold it, but you could get really close. And it was sleeping, as they do. So it was, but I felt like, okay, I'm close enough. I don't actually need to hold this giant Brillo pad. And we got to see a wombat. I didn't mention the wombat list of famous or exciting. And so they were adorable. Sadly, yes, no tactile interaction, but definitely great photo ops. And I left with more understanding of those animals. And it was great.
Your cruise ends up in Auckland. Did you guys spend some time there before you headed back, or what did you guys do before you headed back to Pensacola?
Sorry, I laugh. My husband had been given one assignment for...
I can see where this is going.
Yeah. I had asked him to get an All Blacks jersey for my daughter, just because I think All Blacks are neat, and, it definitely nothing says New Zealand, I think, like the All Blacks, although I guess other people would argue. But so I'd ask her to get a jersey, and she's she's a very comfortable seeking person. And so he bought one when he went out on his tour of the Sky Tower, and I think it would fit a Barbie.
Oh no.
He's like, it says medium. I'm like, honey, did you hold it up to yourself? And he's like, well, anyway. So
why are they so bad, Steve? Why is your gender so bad at that?
We just don't pay attention. We've got our own agenda, Yeah. That is the truth.
I mean, it was, so we had one day when we left the ship, we had a night in Auckland, actually at the Hilton, which is literally across the inlet from where the ship docks. But anyway, lots of road construction, lots of traffic, and we had to hike up this hill to go back to the Sky Tower to exchange this jersey and get one that would fit. So that's what we did. That was the sum of it. And I apologize because I'm a terrible tourist and a terrible reporter, but I can tell you that there was actually a much closer Adidas store that we could have just bought her a new one, but nope, he was going to return it. So, so I do know how to get to the Sky Tower from where the cruise ship docks. I did feel sorry. We stayed in the Hilton, which is right near the port. And when we checked in, they said, well, in the morning, be careful or be aware that there will be a cruise ship outside your room. And so in the morning, there was the Viking Orion. It had made a little U-turn. And so I felt bad for all the people who had to pay a taxi to schlep their 9,000 bags, because we saw them as we were checking in. than to end up right where they had spent the night before. But
Well, kind of looking back on your first time experience with Viking, we've talked about a lot of different things. What's some of the advice you would give somebody who's thinking about doing a Viking cruise for the first time? Or is there anything that we have missed, I guess, that you would want to talk about?
I don't think so. I thought the service was equal. I thought the space was fine. Like I said, maybe pack a little bit less because you do have access to free laundry. I mean, including the soap is free because it just kind of shoots in the washing machine. So you don't have to pack as much. I'm trying to think. The only thing that kind of shocked me was, since I had prepaid the gratuities, then they wouldn't let me add any extra. And then I felt horrible because we had a wonderful stateroom host and hostess. So, maybe, I don't know, maybe I should have done that differently. I'm not quite sure how I would do that differently, but so that was kind of one of those that was weird to me because, Disney, you can like go to guest services and, bump it up or bump it down. And that wasn't available. No, I mean, it was an amazing, amazing cruise and the service was equal. I think the only thing I really kind of missed, and this sounds super silly, is the Disney music in the hallways.
I mean, that is something for sure. And we have had other people say that that's one of the things, and they don't want to switch cruise lines. They love the Disney music, which I totally get.
Yeah. But on the other hand, we did rebook 3 cruises. Oh. So obviously I'm okay without the Disney music.
You could play it in your stateroom. Put it on your phone.
I'll imagine it.
So I do have a question about that. With Viking, they have their river cruises and then the ocean cruises, which you experienced. And in 2022, they're starting their Viking expeditions, which goes to places like the Galapagos, the Antarctic, the Arctic, and the Great Lakes region. Christy, you can take a Viking cruise up to the Great Lakes. But as far as like rebook, did you rebook on board, and was there an advantage to that? And could you take advantages to some of their other products since you're on an ocean cruise? Would you be able to get like say a discount on a river cruise, or how did that work?
Yes, and yes. So I rebooked 3 cruises on board. I could have booked a river cruise, but I'm really loyal to AMA Waterways after doing so many ABDs with them. So I rebooked 2 ocean cruises and 1 expedition cruise to Antarctica.
You have to come back.
Well, it's a ways out.
Yeah, but you have to come back.
So there are several advantages, and I think they all kind of got glommed up in my head. But so whatever the going special is, so if you're booking on board, but you look online and they're like, oh, it's 2-for-1 deposit. Well, you get those specials that are online. And then for 2 of our cruises, they also just had discounts. I mean, that's all it was like, well, here's what the printed price is and the slash. And then I think it was a reduced deposit as well. So for instance, Disney Cruise Line, I'm very loyal. We still have 2 DCLs coming out. But the summer dates had come out while we were there, and I had emailed my travel agent, basically for the Norway, Iceland, Scotland cruise. I think it's 11 days next summer. Well, it was $3,000 more in a navigator's veranda versus a 14-day Norway, Iceland cruise in, the same category we had then on ship. So, because again, it's more for less. That was one, and it makes sense. The second one is from Barcelona to Buenos Aires, I believe. So we're going to do a transatlantic. And again, part of that is just because DCL doesn't do it, but we got amazing, probably a couple $1,000s total, all said, off of that one. And then the Antarctic one, I think we got the, reduced deposit. that one's running a little bit high, but, it'll be a once in a lifetime thing. So we did all of those. And again, they're just little discounts, sort of like, okay, this is you're on board, so you get $200, but oh, look, here's what we're were running for everyone. And then, oh, by the way, if you want this category cabin, there's also a discount. So I'm not sure it's ever 100% set in stone what the discounts are, other than if you're on board, you get credit. That's what it was. Sorry. You got a certain onboard credit for booking on board, and it was to be used on your current sailing. So that's why they ended up sending me a check, was because I had so much onboard credit from the bookings that they just wrote me a check. It was wild.
Okay. That's awesome.
So you should have booked like another 5 more, so you could have gotten even a bigger check.
Should have, because travel was changing while we were on board.
Yeah.
Right.
For lack of a better way of saying it. So they came out, they were the first, to my knowledge, to come out with, okay, if you book now, you can change in 24 hours. They came out with the kind of more flexible booking and no penalty. I think we can cancel or change up to 24 hours before our sailing for the next, 2 cruises. I don't know about the Antarctic one because I think they're still figuring that out. So it's okay, so next summer, if I just decide we don't want to go to Norway and Iceland, we can cancel up to a day before. That's crazy. So, and if we cancel, I think we get a voucher or something. So kind of wild. They're very customer friendly, I guess, is the best I can say.
Well, Christy, any more questions before we finish up here?
I don't think so. It was very informative.
Well, Shay, this sounds like the perfect cruise for once we kick our kids out of the house for my wife and I to transition to.
It was part of our empty nest world tour. I'm going to tell you, we had lots of vacation planned this year. We made some of it. We didn't make others.
But, it's exciting to see that there's a lot of other opportunities out there. I think all of our who love Disney Cruise Line hope is, once they start sailing and they get the wish and hopefully the next 2 ships, that DCL will kind of start to branch out and maybe send one of the smaller ships down to Australia or some other different places to give people kind of some more and different and varied experiences like you guys got to experience on this one.
Hopefully, that would be amazing to have one of the, the magic or the wonder in the South Pacific or, in the transoceanic area. That would be amazing. That would be the perfect setup.
Or down to Buenos Aires too, that transatlantic like that would be just amazing as well.
Oh, it would be great. Go and see South America.
Yes. Well, yeah, because Walt was down there, right? So they've gone every place else Walt has been, so why not South America?
Why not?
Yeah.
All right, DCL, listen up. We've got ideas for you.
We do. Well, Shay, thank you so much for coming on and sharing you and your husband's experience as you spent 3 days together. And no, I'm just kidding. I won't put that in there.
We actually, we spent those 2 days in Sydney too.
I'm just sorry. I was being a smart aleck there.
No, it's okay.
Well, thank you so much, Shay, for coming on and sharing your husband's experience as you guys sailed on Viking Cruise Lines down through Australia and New Zealand. We really do appreciate it. And when you get back from your next one, we'd love to have you back on and talk a little bit more about your experiences with them.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm really glad you allowed me to talk about it. I think Viking is a reasonable jump for maybe people who want to explore the world in a Disney-like setting that Disney hasn't entered yet.
Perfect.
No, it's a good way to describe it.
And when you get back from that EBD trip too, which
for sure,
definitely give us a shout out, because that I looked at that one online between Poland and Austria, and that looks just like an amazing trip as well.
Well, I've been on 2 Danube cruises, so I feel like I really have been to Austria and the Czech Republic, but every year I've asked them for 3 places: Croatia, Poland, and New Zealand. And when they, 2 out of 3, okay. So I'm super excited about Poland. And if you've never been to Prague or Český Krumlov, oh, they're just beautiful. I mean, storybook. I mean, amazing.
Well, once again, Shay, thanks so much for coming on, and we look forward to talking to you soon when you get back from your next adventure.
Oh, thanks. And thanks for taking the time to speak with me, Christy and Steve.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Shay for coming on and sharing her and her husband's wonderful vacation down to Australia and New Zealand as they cruised around on the beautiful Viking Orion this past March. If you'd like to appear on our show as well, you can reach out to me, Steve, at DCLpodcast.com, and we can talk about your Disney Cruise Line Adventures by Disney or Run Disney experiences. Or if you've been on a different cruise lines, one of them that we are looking for is MSC has begun sailing over in Europe. If anybody out there has sailed with MSC, we'd love to get a trip report from them out to you at some point. We've talked about Norwegian, Royal several times, Carnival, and now Viking, and so kind of one of the, and Celebrity with Christy. Christy's been on Celebrity quite a few times, so one other cruise line that we're looking for is MSC, so if you've had an opportunity to sail with them, please reach out to me and we'll get you set up for that. If you would like to support our show, you can do so via our Patreon program. You can go over to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. We appreciate each and every one of our Patreon supporters. That's what helps bring you the show each and every week. Well, between now and our next show, if you are heading out on an adventure of your own, or if you're doing a staycation, or just like we're doing at home, just wrangling the kids and trying to get them through school, online school, or in person, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we wish you and your family to be well, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.